All right, everyone. Now, gender differences are real enough to rear themselves in the everyday happenings of society and cultural maxims we attribute to respective gender, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, men are from Mars. The misgivings between men and women they aren't unheard of by any stretch of the imagination. Unless you've been living under a rock, divorce rates have been skyrocketing. Although I'm not as adept at interpreting statistical analysis, but from my own anecdotal experiences in tandem with statistics, I found a lot of people are disgruntled within marriages because oftentimes one or more partners cannot understand any semblance of another's perspective, right? Many women complain of men not being emotional enough, whereas men complain of women being too emotional. But I find this to be questionable, right? I find women can often be more strategic with their emotions. You know, some psychologists claim they're more emotionally intelligent. I find they can be very adept at analyzing a man's every sensibility and insecurities, sort of level out his personality, right? They could be very adept at narcissistic manipulation techniques, be it in the form of love bombing, gaslighting, and projection, right? Saying men are this, and that while exhibiting the same traits. I believe there's an epidemic of narcissism amongst women, but human beings can all have an inclination to being grandiose given their circumstances, right? It's often the man who's brooding over a woman for hours, for weeks, for months, for years, while the woman has very quickly gotten over any semblance of guilt surrounding the past relationship and often has backups, right? I know many women who they're married to, often very esteemed, very successful men who are quite open about the fact that it was mostly for money and they sleep around on the side with men. This is a pretty common phenomenon, right? Women can withhold their emotions in high demand environments like hospital settings, in law, in academics, some of them, and men, they kind of they unravel their, nowadays in some universities, they're sort of twisted political ideologies, but they can be very logical. They have a capacity for logic and reason when it's necessary, right? And I don't wholeheartedly blame women. Some evolutionary psychologists claim women are opportunistic because of environmental pressures they've faced. But I find that oftentimes this doesn't really, I hold this to scrutiny because in modern society, many women aren't seeking a man as a provider for the sake of child rearing, but only to appease their own hubris, right? They're gratify their indulgences, right? In the form of greed and hedonism and so on and so forth, right? Because the theory is that women desired men who they can extract resources from for the sake of child rearing. But many women today do not want children, right? And I don't blame women wholeheartedly because men hold them to different standards, right? Men will often be more courteous towards a woman and treat them with more dignity than a man, especially when two men admire the same woman. They can be very vindictive towards one another. And oftentimes, this is pursued self-servingly in favor of one's sexual desire, right? Men are often going to act extravagantly towards a woman because he expects sexual favors in return. So it's not stripped of selflessness. It's not you can strip away the selflessness, the seeming selflessness that many men will pursue to arouse a woman and her sensibilities. In any case, it's not like all men and women are like this, but enough to where it became a cultural taboo for a long time. And interestingly, I was going to bring up religion because some people argue return to religiosity is the solution to the fractured gender dynamics, but this practically penetrates the entire world. There were ancient civilizations in which women were rulers, ruthless rulers, and those societies today are more so patriarchal. So you see various cycles in history, right? So, I'll provide some examples. I've known a lot, plenty of, let's say 90% of the women I knew, they usually are very manipulative. I've talked with hundreds of women online. I've dated probably 10, 20 different women, very temporarily though. And a lot of times it's they'll make a lot of promises. Very seldom, if ever, do they come true. I remember the first woman I dated would tell me to meet her after work, and she would never show up. And then weeks later, asked me why I don't write her anymore, as to where I discovered she was pursuing her ex and had me on the side just in case. When they had finally rekindled their relationship, I was out of the picture completely. This happened with multiple women across the board. I very seldom would get closure. They would disappear, make extravagant promises in the process. I even knew women who were actively pursuing men they considered to be unattractive. And I'd overheard them sometimes gleefully expressing to their friends how ugly he is, how stupid he is, how unimportant, uninspiring, and dull the man is, even ugly. Because some of these men were not very attractive, in my humble opinion. I'm not of the homosexual persuasion, but they didn't really fit any semblance of conventional attractiveness, like their bone structure, and they were very short, nerdy guys who I find many women get married to. And my preferences for women don't always typically align with that conventional beauty standard either, but I'm more big into the bone structure first and foremost. I've known women who were dating guys that they weren't even into, and leading them on and showering them with affection for weeks and months until finally discarding them. And then the man thinks they love them, but the woman's just saying to everyone, he's so ugly. And I've seen this on multiple occasions, and the man becomes so disgruntled and disillusioned, and then when he would defend himself, the woman would claim he's abusive. So he goes from a good man, a good kind man, to an abusive man for defending himself, right? I've known other women who they have this entire laundry list of expectations. He has to have seriously a really high paying job. He's got to be extravagantly tall. I'm 6'5". I've still been mistreated. He needs to be practically appeasing her every sensibility at all costs, right? I remember one girl said she was on a date with a guy who was really nice, but he had something in his teeth, and because of that, she didn't want to see him anymore at all, right? I know some women, they're constantly. I remember on dating apps, I put a picture of myself smiling, and girls would tell me I look too nice. But then I was putting pictures of myself not smiling, and they told me I looked like a douchebag. And they claimed you're probably a bad guy. Um, there's endless examples I could give. Most women I've known also really big into drinking, smoking, partying, promiscuity. And, I was being kind of promiscuous, but at least I treated these women with dignity. And I never made any false promises. The relationships weren't pursued under false pretenses. Much less was I pursuing multiple partners at the same time, right? But I'm unsure what to make of polygamy. I suppose it's context dependent, right? But yeah, it's practically every woman. It doesn't matter if you're Western, East Asian, Latin American, European, Eastern European. Some American men think for some reason the East is going to be more innocent in some sense, right? But yeah, a lot of women, they will not care about ghosting you. They'll get angry at you. They won't even talk to you. One woman, I remember I was reading some forums. I saw several posts like this. They broke up with their boyfriend of several years because he cried that his grandmother died, and she felt that it was so pathetic seeing him cry. But at the same time, she probably cries about things she gets offended by. So we hold women to different standards as us. Oh, and it's similar to how we treat children with certain standards. Chris DeLamo said we treat children like children. Reinforces their childishness. Right? So I knew one woman. She was a Muslim woman, and unbeknownst to me, the situation unfolded in another helpless bout of suffering. But from the get-go, she told me I was different, that I was sincere, honest, and very intelligent too. She would engage with my posts on philosophy, and went as far as to claim that I possess all these traits which are exceptional in an environment we shared, which contained a lot of cruelty, obnoxiousness, gossip, cursing. She tolerated others to the extent that she could, although she abhorred vulgarity and criminality, heedless drinking and drugs, and so on and so forth, which was very unusual, and very cleanly person as well, and principled. But there was still a lot of flirtation at the same time, and ultimately it was made clear from the get-go they had an arranged marriage imposed on them, but they still pursued this flirtation for about a year and kind of trivialized it. But had I been in her situation, maybe I would have acted similarly, even if she had acted unwittingly or self-servingly. The context still matters. But in any case, there was very little closure. She just told me, she doesn't allow herself to love because she would never be able to choose somebody that she loves. And she had posted a series of depressing things, although it's really difficult to make sense of whether this was a disingenuity of sorts or forthrightness, because I saw a motherly instinct within her when I would come in after a bout of sleeplessness, hunger, illness, so on and so forth. It was almost like a visceral concern in her to see me suffer. And she was initially very moody and a bit domineering, which I also respected in the sense that she was very assertive, and said what was on her mind, right? She was a bit opinionated about her religion, but at the same time enjoyed listening to my thoughts on religion and morality, my existential questions concerning God. Like I would ask, oh, would you still act in accordance with your religion had God not been real? Would you still be moral without morality? And she would never spite me in response. In fact, she had told me I'm intelligent and honest. And she would also defend me in front of people. When I was met with racial antagonism, she would defend me. So a very upstanding person, and interestingly, me and her possess some similar yet different physical traits, which I found intriguing. Although I'm trying not to apply magical thinking to relationships, oftentimes that leaves you even more disillusioned, right? But beautiful gem of a woman, right? High cheekbones, these beautiful dark almond-shaped eyes, freckles, but very feminine, motherly type person who very, very much wanted to have children. So very respectable. But my misgiving was, oh, well, it's kind of like disillusioning to know that a man who's never even known you gets to have you forever as a wife. But in any case, I had a misgiving like, oh, well, if the whole world became irreligious or nihilistic in some sense, would people just stop caring? Would you stop being steadfast in your self-possession? Or would you simply submit yourself to your own whims? But do people naturally want to, drink and take drugs and cheat and lie and spite others and manipulate them? Is that a naturally occurring phenomenon, or is this just a response to a sick culture in the modern world, right? Because that's kind of just like being like everyone else. It's not being very unique. Like some people claim what we're seeing in modern society is the truth, and the truth about gender dynamics, for that matter, with women having less environmental pressures. We're not in a state of nature anymore where they needed to be dependent on men's physical prowess. They have a job market they have access to. But you've seen this everywhere. I remember even seeing a video especially in some third world countries where the woman's like showered with gold. Like she won't accept the man unless he gives her gold. In any case, this woman still hurt me. It's often those we care about most we're often hurt most by those we care about, not those who actually have any animosity towards it. It's easier to forget people who hate us. It's almost impossible to forget being hurt by someone you care about. But in any case, it was difficult to really interpret her behavior as someone who had cultural or religious and cultural constraints imposed on them. But given a lack of religion, given a newfound irreligiosity, would they still be a sensitive person? Because they describe themselves as a sensitive person, right? They're even concerned about my finances, tell me not to spend. So it was really difficult to gauge whether or not this was simply an act. But there was another Muslim girl I remember, very shy and timid. And a lot of the girls who really appreciated my heart and my mind, not only my physical appearance, they were of the Islamic persuasion. Some of them had a inclination to be flirtatious, but would often, impose boundaries at the same time. making it very clear they cannot pursue a relationship with a man who is not of their religion. Right? But yeah, some very shy, timid, and like I found it unusual because most girls I know are very loud and obnoxious and convicted. Like when I first started my job, this girl told me I'm a typical man because I didn't know how to do something the first time I worked there, and just very boastful and pompous. And someone asked her about a man she may like, and the first thing she said was, "Does he have money? If not, I don't care." All right, so the whole manosphere thing, a red pill, I don't know if they're reacting to like cultural norms sort of, or generations of cultural conditioning that's rearing its ugly head, or some biological predisposition between the respective sexes. In any case, the women who really admired me told me that as a man, I'm an outlier of sorts, right? And they would respond to my misgivings towards women with sympathy. They say, yes, those women don't want you because they want a man just like them. That many of these men and women are more similar to one another than they are different. We talk about the differences between men and women, but there are similarities, like in certain types of contexts, in certain cultural contexts. Men and women will desire a certain type of man and woman respectively, right? A loud, obnoxious woman is often going to desire a loud and obnoxious man, right? Where I went to college, the drug drinking culture, and I'm not saying you're bad for drinking every once in a while, but this drunkenness and this disrespect, people who would be up all night shouting and cursing and acting belligerent, those were the type of people who hooked up and got together. Nobody was single, right? But if I told a lot of women, they would say, well, you've got to be doing something wrong, clearly, to have this much failure in relationships. Even some older boomers, they say, well, I'm married, I have children. Something's wrong with the youngsters. You guys are not real men. But these women who deeply admired me, especially those who were very religious, particularly of the Islamic faith, not the Christian women, because even the Christian women would ridicule me. They had told me, yes, I agree with you. A lot of women are degenerate, right? Even amongst their own community, they found women being conniving, right? Some women I've known who are deeply religious, they utilize that as a means of cruelty, for instance, to where you can simultaneously sin but present yourself as spiritual or religious and dignified, so on and so forth. So lead a double life, essentially. In any case, almost every man will tell you this on the dating apps, that you could be as nice as possible, you could be a player, you can be confident, you can look good, you can look not so good, and a lot of times you're just going to get ghosted either way. It doesn't matter if you sacrifice your entire heart and soul for a woman, a lot of times they're not going to be satisfied. And it's like, I mean, just look at modern culture. Like, look how a lot of people treat each other. Like, yeah, a lot of people are nice, like in society. Like, where I work, people are really polite. They're nice. Like, they're patient. They're kind. Like, 70% of the people. But a lot of them are boastful and arrogant, and they want things their own way, right? They're like, give me extra coupons. Oh, it expired? Well, that's not fair. This and that. Can you make an exception? Someone told me I'm elderly. Or some people get so angry over minor inconveniences, And I see the way a lot of mothers treat their children. Like when I'm at work, the child might be sad, like genuinely sad. And the mother just has this disdain or like disgust almost, or contempt for the child. It's like they give them these really wicked, conniving looks at the child, and like the child looks like they're gonna cry. Like it's so sad. So I don't know how people raise children. I think a lot of the times that the parents are kind of in their own world and they're just making up for it with material things. I mean, look at children. We have them in the cradles and in another room entirely, with a camera watching them. In some tribal societies, mothers are holding their children from time immemorial, throughout their formative years, and that nurtures a certain trust amongst the tribe, right? So, I'm not making any excuses for men. Men's cruelty is often more overt. It's vulgar, right? It can be warlike. A woman's cruelty is often more covert. It's more scheming and calculating. And that requires a certain type of pattern recognition and logic, right? Some women could be very obnoxious and boastful, but, just like some men can be very collected and calculating in one moment, but also sort of explosive and dangerous when he's finally got you contained. Plenty of narcissistic men out there, right? But I kind of made that clear from the get-go. The reason many men appease women is due to their own sexual desires. Or at least that's my theory. But also because it's been so it's been so culturally inculcated over time. Religion sort of, I think, also influenced this, to where women are often seen as more clean in some religious societies, but in Islam it's more patriarchal, I suppose, right? And they have some questionable things to say about women, but I'm still ambivalent as to the nature of the corresponding sexes. I find that men and women can be equally incurious and imperceptive and aggrandizing, but the means by which they achieve their cruelty often differs, right? But they may be similar to one another in some regards, although the standards they're held to differ drastically in many instances. It's not like they can each both get away with certain things, but I mean, think about it. Something to sleep on. But yeah, I definitely know women who seemed very compassionate. I just, I don't know how else I can really extrapolate or corroborate these convictions of mine. But yeah. Oh, another statistic for you is that marriages between women typically fail, right? Even more so than traditional marriages amongst men and women, right? Yeah, but that's pretty much all I have to share.